Ladies and gentlemen who've just joined us, I'd like to present the amazing, wonderful Alison Sainsbury she's from Australia, I'm from New Zealand, but we don't let that get in the way of our friendship. So without any much more ado, here, take it away, Alison.
Thanks, Bruce. So look, thanks everybody for joining us. If anybody who's staying up late for it, really appreciate that, or getting up very early, conversely. So as you've probably heard, but I'm going to reiterate, we do have a fund set up to donate to first line defenders, you know, the people who are working really hard for us at the moment. So do please go to that link and throw in a few bucks. That would be awesome. There is also a break room available that you can join during the conference to speak to other people. I'm planning on popping in there after my presentation, hang out, basically, you know, take off the jacket, chill, answer any questions. So that's a really cool place to be. So I'm presenting to you today, as Bruce said, from Australia, in fact, from lovely Sydney, which unfortunately does not look like that right now. It's raining and miserable outside, but that's fine because I'm inside, I'm warm. So we're here today to talk about multi-site Sitecore, and this is the new normal for me. It's a long time, really, since I've worked on a single site instance. So today's presentation is going to be an overview of a new guide from Sitecore created by the SBOS team and a global collaboration of MVPs. And it's called Planning and Implementing a Multi-Site Personalisation Strategy, and it is available for download right now. And I know you're all immediately going to the link to download it. That, you know, it's 50 pages long and you'll be reading it forever. But, you know, you can get back to it later. There is the link in the chat. Okay, so firstly, I think it's good to start with a quick definition of what a multi-site is. So simply put, it's more than one site on a single Sitecore instance. So that site may be a website or a shop or apps or whatever, okay? The advantages of sharing, the advantages of having a multi-site include sharing of content, license, hosting, user credentials, and a single XDB. Now, this sharing of content and customer data means that those opportunities for return on investment are much, much higher. And the potential for return on investment is also much, much higher. Can I just stop for a second? Can you guys see this? Oh, you're not seeing the right screen. Poo. Okay, hold on, I'll just fix that. There we go. Better. All right. I'm not sure why that keeps happening. Okay, so those complexities, though, the complexities of implementation on a multi-site are therefore a bit higher. You know, not a lot, but still planning and collaboration, which is something I'm going to bang on a bit about today, much more crucial than ever. Now, Sitecore's marketing frameworks are extremely flexible and they are more than capable of handling this, but first you need to put the work in. So this is what we're going to be talking about today for the marketing configurations and the strategy. Now, before I get started, what I would like is for everybody to take a note of that, and I will paste that link in the chat in a little while as well. We're running a little poll. I want to know, in the last 12 months or so, you know, what percentage of sites that you've worked on have been a multi-site as opposed to a classic one-site Sitecore instance. The results from that I'll be posting on socials later, and we'll also use it to help us understand if this is an area where we should be continuing to develop resources for you. So let's start off. Now, here's what we found were the keys to get the best results from your multi-site, and they are not surprisingly pretty much the same as for a single site, just, you know, more of them. So what I would really like you to do, and I really will bang on about this one, plan early and plan often. Creating a personalisation plan as early as possible in your project is the key to success with any Sitecore optimisation project. But then create it as early as possible with a multi-site and then revise and update that plan regularly. Collaboration, another key. You need to work with cross-functional teams to build a comprehensive plan and to gain engagement, buy-in and alignment around the plan across your business. Then start small. It's a bit boring, but, you know, quick wins are always a really good way to start. You know, align those activities to the key business objectives. Choose those segments which are valuable, they have volume, and they don't require a huge amount of new content to be created. And then evangelize. Broadcasting your results to the wider business is really important. those results clearly tied to the business objectives. What you tend to see with a multi-site is that, they don't obviously build and go launch with all sites at once. They start out with, one or two, and then they roll it out. Enthusiasm can flag a little during that time. So evangelizing the results that you get early on is a really good way to keep, interest up in the process. And then keep going. This is the key to return on investment. Plan, implement, measure, learn, start again, and use an agile process with a prioritized backlog of tactics. And then invest. You've already invested in the platform. I am not saying invest in more MarTech. No, invest in what you've already got. Invest in the people, the training, the research, and the expertise that you really need to succeed. And there are some key questions, important questions for this kind of optimization project at this kind of size. Firstly, you need to know who's your executive sponsor, okay? Identify the executive or executives who are going to be the owners of the program, who are going to evangelize at a very senior level for you and to help clear the roadblocks when they arise. You are going to need a central team. You need to have people who are going to be the owners of the setup and the organizational experts. You really will need that center of excellence. It doesn't matter if it's only a few people, but you really do need that to organize everything. Make sure you know why you're doing it. You don't personalize for the sake of personalization. You personalize because you have objectives that you want to achieve. You also need to have analytics and KPIs to back those up. Sitecore analytics, yes, but other analytics. And then coming off the back of that is the user research and the personas. So knowing why you were doing it is the objectives, and then who are you doing that for? And that's where that user research comes into it. And you don't need to have the fully built out personas with lovely alliterative names and things like that, but you do need to have a good understanding, or at least, a pretty good thoughts about who the customers are that you want to personalize for. And then finally, the customer journeys. For a multi-site, and particularly some of the models that we're going to look at, customer journeys are very, very important. Again, it could be a wall-sized, thing with beautiful emojis and cute little cartoons on it. It could be something that somebody's done up on a whiteboard, but you need to have an understanding of how the customers are going through and engaging with these sites, so you know where you should be personalizing them. So that's the background. Now let's get into the details, okay? What kind of multi-site are you? So we found that there were 4 main models of multi-sites that we looked at. Organizational models and their approaches to a digital representation of their brands and their structures differ wildly, but there were 4 main kinds of multi-site, and most organizations will fall into one or a combination of those. So there's the multi-region, where you have a site, a multinational with companies in different countries, and they have, brand.com, brand.com.au, brand.com.jp, .co.uk, etc. Then you have multi-channel. So this is typically one brand with multiple channels on Sitecore. And this can be lots of different kinds of organizations. It could be financial services or utility, universities. It could be anybody who's got the front-end site and then a shop, a portal, even sub-sites like a business site or something like that. Typically, there's the high-level domain for the public-facing site, and there are subdomains for the other sites. Multibrand, this is one of the really cool ones. They're all really cool, but multibrand is really fun, and my background is in multibrand, so I think it's kind of really challenging. So this is where you have a house of brands where, they are all quite independent brands, and they all have their own top-level domains, but they're all sitting on the same Sitecore instance. And then multi-segment. So multi-segment is not a true micro multi-site, but it faces a lot of the same challenges, so we included it in the white paper. Now, let's get into it. For each of the models, we looked at some strategic considerations and quick wins. So for multi-region, we're talking about, as I said, one organization with a global presence with all of the regions on one instance. They often have a very similar UX, information architecture, and sometimes even content shared across regions. And they may also use language versioning, which I'll talk about in a second. That creates a special thing that you just need to take care of when you're actually rolling out personalization. So what are some strategic considerations for the multi-region? Well, firstly, personalisation across sites in a pure multi-region is often not really a key consideration because people are going to be visiting the site in their country or their region as opposed to moving back and forth across countries. This kind of project usually starts with 1 or 2 regions and then rolls out more widely. So, you know, they build a couple in, you know, one particular area and then they roll it out more widely. So when you're doing that, it can be tempting that you start with that region and you just focus on that region. But it's really, really important that you, while you're acting locally, you still think globally first. So you've got to think about some things like, will the optimization be centrally operated or will it be run in each region? So, you know, if you're going to be having marketing teams or digital teams in each region or each country who are running everything, how are you going to coordinate? How are you going to collaborate across them? Okay. Whereas if it's centrally operated, you might not be close enough to the local, country to actually really get the best possible results. And that's where the next point comes in. You need to do the local research. You know, in my experience working across Asia Pacific and India and ANZ, regional cultures use digital very, very differently. So make sure you do consult with the local teams to make sure that you understand how their customers approach digital. And there are some key configurations for a multi-region. Firstly, naming conventions. Naming conventions are a fantastic thing to use, and this is just a case of creating, a convention around an abbreviation that you put onto all of your marketing configurations to make it much easier to look for things. You would use this for goals, campaigns, profiles, folders, categories, basically everything. Make it a standard thing that everybody does. And then you want to use folders to make sure that your marketing control panel is organized. And I'm going to get into this naming conventions, folders, multiple EVS and stuff in the future. So consider multiple engagement value scales if the goals are noticeably different. So this can happen where, for example, in one country, you may have a direct channel to market, and in other countries, you're going through a distribution channel, or possibly you're not even selling direct to the market, at all. You only go through the distribution channel, or you only go to business customers as opposed to consumers and things like that. That can cause a lot of challenges with your engagement value scale. So you might want to consider multiple engagement value scales. Okay, so the next model is multi-region. Sorry, still on the same model. Multi-region. We're looking at some quick wins here. Campaign-based personalization. I'm a huge fan of this. It's always a really good quick win, and particularly if you have sites rolling out in individual countries, they're probably putting campaigns in the market. So the great thing about campaign-based personalization is the second you turn a campaign on, the traffic is there to personalize and the data points are there to personalize. So it's a fantastic quick win which can help you get some runs on the board with the early starters, and you can then evangelize that across the business so that they're just, champing at the bit to get their sites online and to get their personalization up and running. Geographic personalization, funnily enough, is actually a good one for multi-region. If you're building a site which covers a bunch of different countries, for example, as Agreco did with their site to cover various Middle Eastern countries, then using geo-IP personalization to do local content or imagery for each country is a really good way of, making it still feel like it's that particular country's site, even though you're running one which covers half a dozen different countries. Right, so multi-channel. Let's look at multi-channel. This is probably, as I said, one of the most common configurations that I see. I was actually working on one of these this morning. So this is one organization with more than one site for the same brand. So you may have the brand site and then something like the portal or, mybrand.com. You might have a shop, you may even be running things like kiosks and things like that, and you may even have another site which is for a completely different customer segment. Now, the branding is the same for all of these because it's one brand, but the purpose for each may be quite different. Now, for this, personalization is an absolute imperative. You've got to do it because the customer doesn't see that they're looking at different channels. They just think, I'm still interacting with X brand, regardless of where they are. And if they have to keep telling you who they are, or if they get a very different experience across all those channels, then they're going to get frustrated and they're going to leave you. So some strategic considerations for multi-channel. Key objectives in this kind of site often include things like lead nurturing across the channels, cross-sell, upsell, retention, and things like reducing cost to serve. Journey mapping. Cannot do it without the journey mapping here. You need to at least have an understanding of how your customers are moving across all those channels so you know where you want to personalize for them. And you have to overcome organizational silos. It doesn't seem like it would because it's just one brand, but often there are some serious organizational silos in this kind of situation. Marketing might own the public-facing side, you know, the call center or customer service or somebody like that might own the support site, you know, sales might own the shop site, etc. And you need to get them together, right? This kind of rollout or this kind of personalization program often starts with the public-facing site first, but again, you want to future-proof it just like you did with the multi-regions with a really strong strategy upfront. Some key configurations here. Engagement values across these channels can be very, very different, so you may want to consider multiple engagement value scales again. But one thing I'll say about engagement value scale and the goals and creating those objectives around personalization is it's really important for people to understand that the goal of personalization is not to get a customer to the 100-point goal or to get them to 100 points. It is just to increase their engagement. You might be increasing their engagement above the 100 points. You know, in fact, you probably will, because in order to get to 100-point goal, they're definitely going to be triggering other goals along the way. But the idea is to increase engagement to a specific goal, which is higher up. So they can get a little hung up sometimes on the 100-point goal. So make sure that they understand what you're trying to do with engagement value scale. And one thing that I'd like to speak about with multi-channel is if you do have a customer data integration, and often this kind of site does, then be careful with it. You know, don't use that kind of data where the customer doesn't expect it. So, you know, if you have, say, your portal, your customer portal on there, and you have your public-facing site, if somebody comes to the public-facing site and they're not aware that they're kind of logged in, authenticated, and you are too personal with them, you know, not even name, but just, you know, hey, your thing is about to expire or whatever have you, before they're expecting it, then they're gonna get, you know, a bit freaked, and they're gonna, you know, be like, clear all my data, and then you're gone. So be really careful. Use a light touch on places where they're not feeling like they're in a secure environment. So some good quick wins for multi-channel, and there are lots of them. Profile-based personalization is a really good one here, to carry those profiles from the public side in the research phase through to the transactional channels and the purchase or loyalty stage. Journey-based personalization, as I said, getting your journeys in worked out and then following key segments across the journey. Marketing automation is a really, really good tool for this. And I hope everybody saw Andy's presentation right before this about how to automate all the things, because that's where marketing automation on multi-channel will really help you. And then something which is really cool if you can get it happening is a post-purchase reacquisition campaign. And the only reason, by the way, that you can't get this happening is you haven't tried. So what this is where you work with a media agency or whoever's buying your ads or doing your emails or what have you, to intelligently reacquire the customer after purchase. So there's nothing more annoying than going and buying something from the site and then getting ads to go buy the same thing back to the site. However, what is great is if you buy something from the site and then you see content which is re-engaging you around what you just bought. It might be supportive content which is reinforcing the decision that you just made. It might be you know, onboarding content. It might be, you know, cross-sell, upsell, etc. And then reacquiring them into the site and continuing their personalization journey. Multi-brand. Okay, this is a big one. Multi-brand sites, they probably offer the greatest potential uplift for personalization, as it's a chance to overcome otherwise siloed marketing operations. As I said, my background is in multi-site, you know, in multi-brand, and getting customer data shared can be a tricky thing. And Sitecore, having all of these sites on Sitecore, is a really good way to do that. So usually this is what's called a house of brands, and usually these brands are at least complementary in some way, which means that you end up getting very, very different brand identities, but usually some overlap in the kinds of customers that you're trying to personalize for. So personalization there can deliver great rewards. As I said, this is your chance to actually share customer data across all of these brands. But there are some technical considerations you're going to need to work around here. For starters, always be aware that the customer may be unaware that they're dealing with the same organization. So, you know, there are some extremely large multi-brand organizations in the world. When you're dealing with a particular brand that is part of that organization and then you go to another one, you might not be thinking, I am part of X multinational. You're just thinking, what? So you want to use a light touch here. Really use a light touch. Surprise and delight rather than startle. There is a technical issue here. So separate domains. You will have separate top-level domains in all likelihood. This is going to cause a problem, which I'll talk about in a little bit, but there are ways to get around it. Again, often these are very, very siloed organizations with their own marketing departments, their own finance, etc. Maybe IT is a shared service or what have you. You've really got to get them together to collaborate. Otherwise, there's really no point in having all of those sites on the same instance. Probably want to look at a hybrid organization and model if at all possible. This is where you want to get your executive sponsor involved. Having a center of excellence in a multi-brand organization is really going to be the way to go in order to foster collaboration and share insights across all of the different organizations, which are probably busy doing their own thing anyhow. Now, when you start doing the strategy here, you start with those similarities to create a baseline in the taxonomies and objectives. And then, as with multi-region, a well thought out naming convention and organisation of the marketing control panel will really help everybody stay friendly. But be very, very aware of what the privacy considerations are. And as I said, in addition to the privacy considerations, think about what the customer is expecting. Think about how you're going to delight them and not scare them. So some good quick wins here. I love profile-based personalization in a multi-brand. You want to look for common content, offers, service, support, or aligned products, and create a common profile group which you can apply to all of those so that you can then take those profiles and pattern cards across the sites. Journey-based personalization. Think it through. If the customer has researched or bought X, what is their next logical need on the Y site? And also think about, can you share content across these sites? And to entice the customer from one site to another, if there's something that you've got that says, hey, if you use this product from X brand and you use this product from Y brand, together you're going to get a really good result, then share that content across both sites and try and get people to link back and forth from one site to another. Campaign-based personalization is also a really good one here. Now, the campaigns are probably being run by each brand independently, but look for similarities in the campaign targeting to multiply the returns of that acquisition spend. And if possible, if you have separate media agencies, get them together. If you have one media agency, then go to them and say, I need to take advantage of this, okay? You want to reuse those audiences with high engagement across acquisition campaigns. So looking at the campaign targeting that's and the campaign audiences that are coming in and the engagement value that they and the particular goals that they're triggering, you need to get your media agency to understand how Sitecore and Sitecore analytics work. And then marketing automation. Definitely use marketing automation here. It is a superpower. I'm going to get into that a little bit more. Multi-segment. Now, as I said, multi-segment is not technically speaking a multi-site, although it might also be multi-site because it might also be multi-region or multi-channel. But it's one company with very different customer segments. So you might have a direct-to-consumer segment. You might have one that goes through a distribution channel of some sort, and then you might have a business segment. So think about, this is often like a manufacturer. Think about something like if you sold office equipment or computers or something, you know, the printer that you're selling to somebody for their home office, probably selling a lot of those right now, is very, very different to the printer that you're selling as a multi-function center to, you know, a 10,000 person company, okay? So although this is not a true multi-site, as I said, it might also be. So all of these are potential for overlap. So the consideration therefore and the preparation required is similar to the other models, and that's why we included it in this white paper. You can have a really big diversity of objectives here, channels to market, customer profiles, and even products. It can all be really different. So this is where you want to be keeping things really, really tidy in your marketing control panel. So some strategic considerations here. Alignment around engagement values is a key challenge. Doing a planning workshop with all of those different segment teams in the room, probably the biggest holdup is going to be on engagement value scale, because they're just going to get caught up on whether a business to consumer top goals, such as, possibly purchasing something or, going straight through to a stockist, is equal in value to a business-to-business top goal, which might be a sales inquiry, which is obviously not a direct sale. However, it might represent an exponentially larger dollar value. So there can be a bit of discussion there. So for that reason, you might want to consider, again, the multiple engagement value scale, but you just make sure that the values are aligned. So don't let them go off and create an engagement value scale, which is 0 to 10, while somebody else is doing it 0 to 100, and somebody's going right out there and doing 0 to 1,000. You just make sure that the values are aligned. And then plan the UX really carefully on this kind of site. So you want to think about components, and particularly the kind of components that you'll be personalizing, and think, do I need separate ones or do I need the same ones? So thinking around, for example, some kind of a contact us component. You could have one contact us component and you could personalize it for these different segments. Or potentially you might want to have different contact us components because you want to map them to different goals, which is part of being able to segment these customers. So just, this is why planning up front is going to be really important. You do need a robust taxonomy and governance, particularly around facets. I'm going to have a look at what facets are in a second. So, make sure that everything is set up well, and there's the naming conventions and your taxonomies are set up and everybody's using them. And one thing I would really encourage you to look at with this kind of site, because it works really well, is the kind of self-selector, which is a micro conversion. And you can map that then to customer-based profile cards. A really good example of this was Maersk, shown at the recent Sitecore World Tour. And anybody who's got access to the Habitat Home demo can go in and see how this is done with the content finder using Sitecore forms. Basically, you select some things and then it maps into profile values. It's a really clever way of personalizing. So, this can be part of a journey mapped personalization strategy. But remember, if you do this kind of thing, don't just sit and forget it. You want to continue to develop it as Maersk did. So some really good quick wins here. Profile-based personalization. Profile-based personalization here is not really so much going to be around sharing profiles across all of these segments as really clearly segmenting the segments and offering them very different journeys. But you start high level with one profile set across all the segments, and then you can add additional profile groups for each segment as your understanding grows. And then there's goal-based personalization, which is another really good way of segmenting your customers, because the key challenge here is to segment them, as I said. So if you have different goals for different segments, then you can use those to identify them and personalize to show other relevant calls to action. Facet-based personalization, so using facets to classify the goals and campaigns, and then using the facets to segment the customers. And then, of course, you can combine the facets. So you may have something like customer type and product type and drill down further into those customer types. But facets are really going to be very helpful. And one of my favorites in this kind of site is a referral URL. B2B customers and site customers, from my point of view, B2B organizations often have small but very valuable referral traffic segments. So, they might be putting articles on professional media sites, for example, or they might have, an organization which is sending them traffic, and they can be really small but very, very, very valuable. Those are an easy, quick win. So definitely have a look at your referral traffic and see if there's anything you can mine out of that. Right, so that's all of our different models. Now we're going to have a look at some practical approaches here and what you can put in place to scale this kind of thing. Firstly, as I said earlier, you need to invest, and investing sometimes just means time. So invest in your learning. There are a number of really great white papers and guides that have been released by Sitecore lately. I encourage you to go and have a look at them, find them on the SBOSS page. And then our wonderful people at Customer Success have put together some great little videos which are a good intro into understanding how to master personalisation. They can be found at CS 101. Those are completely free. You know, spend a little time with those and also use those to get the non-comfortable digital marketers across what they're going to be able to do. So organising the marketing control panel. This is going to be really important. That's basically what I've been banging on around in each one of those models. You've got to think of your marketing control panel as kind of like a filing system, okay? And if you've got a bunch of different teams in the filing system, putting stuff anywhere they like and not naming it correctly, you're very quickly not going to be able to find anything, and it can be very, very hard to fix. So get this organized up front and make sure everybody understands not just how, but why they need to stay on top of this. So your taxonomies, groups, channels, facets, right? Understand what they are and use them. And I'll talk about them a bit more in a moment. Create a framework that works for you. So there's no one size fits all here. You know, you need to look at what you're trying to do, how your organization works, etc. But create that framework. Document it, don't just have it in your head, document it and educate everyone on the how, and as I said, the why to use it. None of this is hard, but they need to know why. You're not going to be looking over their shoulder all the time to make sure that they're doing it, so they need to understand the reasons to do that. Something I'd really encourage you to do is to use the description fields in your taxonomies to future-proof. It'll take you 30 seconds to write a description of what a facet is, or what a you know, campaign group is, or what the profile does. You know, but putting that in there is really, really helpful for the inevitable day when you go off to, you know, do other wonderful things, and then somebody else comes along and tries to pick up after you. Having that in there is fantastic. There can also be some really cool uses for values in here. So I'm not just talking about goals, I'm talking about other things. You can do some fun stuff with values. Have a look in the white paper for how that will work. And then also I'd consider using images. I mean, don't spend forever creating icons, but images can be really helpful, again, just to kind of give that visual representation of what you're dealing with. One very practical tip here, if you're dealing with campaign facets or goal facets, do not right click and rename them. If you do that, they're not going to show up. They're not going to, kind of the link gets broken when you go and try and apply them in the marketing control panel and in the campaign creator. You want to change the display name only. So, you know, and if you do rename them, by the way, you can just go back and rename them back to campaign facet 1, etc. But yeah, use a display name. It looks exactly the same and it just doesn't break that, that link. Create that naming convention and use it, okay? So groups, facets, goals, campaigns, profiles, basically all the stuff you're going to be using. You want a 3-letter acronym or a 4 to whatever works for your organization, whatever makes sense for you, and you want to be applying that to all of those configurations. So it might be the region, it might be the brand, it might be the segment, etc. Whatever it is, the channel, doesn't matter, use it, okay? This will make it so much easier for your teams to see what they're looking for, either in marketing control panel or in the engagement analytics or marketing automation or anywhere else, right? And they can also search for it. It means they can search for all the things that they're looking for. So, you know, there's really good reasons for doing this. So some of the ways to keep that, you know, great big filing system organized are the categories and folders. And it's really good to understand what the differences are here and when you would use each one. So categories are typically a top level structure and they're just there to organize. And they're often overlooked. I like them, but they're overlooked. Folders are, however, really, really, really useful. So folders are used to organize, but you can also use them to set permissions. And you can have as many levels of folders as you need. Don't go crazy because you don't want to be digging down 10 levels. But, you know, it's a really good way to make sure that everything stays neat and tidy and people don't have to scroll forever to find what they're looking for. Facets are, as I said, goal facets and campaign facets. Basically, what you would probably do is in your folders, you replicate the facet structure where it's appropriate, okay? That way everybody's pretty clear about what they do. I would consider organizing goals by something like the site For starters, or possibly the brand, you know, the value or the stage in journey as a sub-level, and the segment. And then consider organizing campaigns by things like region, site, brand, etc., and then kind of dig down into further levels. So let's have a look at goals and engagement value scales. So I banged on about multiple engagement value scales. What does that sound like? Well, for starters, I'm not going to shock anybody by saying start with a plan. You know, you need a goal matrix here. So we've got one in the white paper, which you can download, have a look at that and think about how you would use it. Right, you use this matrix to list all the goals for the site and then rank them according to the objectives and which sites they're going to turn up on. Right, now don't worry if you don't have all of them, you can add more goals later, but at least some mapping here will tell you if you need one engagement value scale or more than one. Okay, and for the record, multiple engagement value scales just means folders, and then separate them out, and it just makes people feel like there's a little bit of distance between those engagement value scales. So the questions that you'll ask when you're looking at this matrix is, how much overlap is there in the goals across the site? Are they very, very different, or is there only a couple of, you know, ones that are different to each? How many goals do you have? You know, sometimes in these instances, if you've got a lot of sites in there, you can end up with a lot of goals, and you don't want to be scrolling through those. So that can just that alone can be good enough reason to have some folders. If there's an overlap, is there value in sharing the goals to trigger personalization or marketing automation across the sites? And then how will you be needing to report on them? So will you report by individual goal or by facet? You know, so just take a little time to think through those things. There is no ironclad rule. You do what will work for you, but you think it through, you make a decision, and then you put the results into place. So similar to your folders, as I said, you would use your goal facets, although there's different uses for these, right? So facets are used to group goals that are similar, i.e. across segments, journey stage, site, etc. Now, there are 3 default goal facets in the marketing control panel under taxonomies, but you can add more underneath if you need to. Goal facets appear by default in Experience Analytics. So they're a really good way to filter the goals, and you can also use them as a personalization rule, personalization with an out-of-the-box rule. Typically, they kind of follow on from that engagement value scale mapping, although you may also want to filter them by things like customer type and journey stage, etc. So it could be a little different to the matrix, but you know, you might have a few more in there. So have a think about how you could use facets across your goals, but remember that they're optional, right? Not all goals need your facets. One of the things which is really helpful if you are going to be creating multiple engagement value scales is to have a scale set. So, you know, if you're going to be going multiple teams on board with those goals, to have something which gives them a bit of an idea of, okay, that's roughly where that goal should be, you know, is going to make it much easier to align. So, you know, the awesome Rick Bauer came up with this and sent it over, and I know he's on the line right now. So this is a scale set for engagement value scale. You take this, you work it out according to your site, maybe put some, you know, pretend goals in there. Sometimes they think about, you can think about an engagement value scale as a reverse goal funnel, you know, or as a customer journey where people are going all the way up to the top. Okay, but having that kind of guidance and giving that to all of the teams makes it much easier. And if they add more goals later on, they can kind of look at it and go, yeah, I understand where that will go. Okay, campaigns, right? As I showed you in the quick wins, campaigns are a really common way of personalizing. So outlining a campaign taxonomy for your Sitecore instance is going to be really crucial, right? You want to start with campaign groups because every campaign needs a campaign group. Otherwise, it appears in Experience Analytics as unknown group, which is really messy. Okay. You reproduce your campaign groups as campaign folders is what I would suggest. So campaign groups are up in taxonomies under the marketing control panel, then the campaign folders go under campaigns. So reproducing that same structure is just a really good way, again, of keeping it neat and, you know, not having people accidentally messing with each other's campaigns. Of course, the folders can then also be used to set permissions so people don't accidentally mess with other people's campaigns. Every campaign also does need a channel, you know, and that then appears in the channels report in analytics, and there's an out-of-the-box rule that you can use to personalize. Now, there are a lot of out-of-the-box channels, some of which I think of disappeared into the mists of time. However, a few are missing, such as Instagram. So you can easily add those. I also consider cleaning up the channels a little bit. Don't necessarily get rid of ones that are in there, but you could create a folder at the top, which was, brand, our brand channels, and just put the most commonly used ones up there so that everybody can get to it really quickly without having to dig down all the way. And then finally, there's campaign facets. So similar to goal facets, however, there are 6 out of the box and you can add more underneath, and they are optional. The way you know whether or not you need them, hello, I'm going to tell you to create a plan. So as you do with your taxonomies, take some time to build out a campaign matrix. And again, this is in the guide after consulting with your teams about the kinds of campaigns they run, okay? So this matrix here uses, it has groups across the customer segments. It has the channels that are being used. And then in the campaign facets, there's actually 2 levels in there. So there's campaign facets of product, segment, objective, campaign, and region. And then underneath each of those campaign facets, they're all broken out by site, okay? So what that would look like in practice, if you were, for example, doing a Google display ad for an end of financial year campaign for a computer being run by your small office, home office brand in Japan, you would then be picking these tags. So the group would be Soho, the channel is display, campaign facet 1 would be product, and then you'd be digging down into the Japan site and computer 1, remembering you may have different products across different countries. Campaign facet 2, you would be looking at segment, Japan site, small business, because this is a Soho campaign. Campaign facet 3, objective, yeah, not really on this one, so we're going to leave that one blank because they're optional. Campaign facet 4, it's the end of financial year sale, and we want to choose that so that we can, either personalize with everybody who has responded to an end of financial year campaign ad, or even just benchmark all these campaigns. So, and then campaign facet 5 is region, and that is not going to have a subgroup because that's already region. So that's just region Japan, okay? Pretty straightforward. Profiling strategy. So this is the last item we'll use in the most common in the marketing taxonomies, and this is used a lot, okay? So as you have with the goals and campaigns, you want to look for overlap here and create a matrix. The degree to which you'll expect visitors to go from one site to another will have a really big impact on how much similarity you will see between the profiles. In a multi-region site, probably less common, however, the customer groups are probably going to be very similar. In multi-channel, it'll be extremely common. So you want to start with some high-level profiles so that you can share those across all the channels, right? Use those naming conventions. You've created them, use them, right? Use those, keep them clear, use folders to keep the profiles clear and tidy, right? But set up the folders early, because if you move profiles around, they can break. So make sure you get that organizational, your filing system, get that set up nice and early, right? And then I would also recommend, if you want an in-depth discussion of how to really build profiling and how to do profiling strategy, do not miss Jackie Baxter's presentation at the other end of today's SUGCON. I'm going to be up for it. It's going to be in the morning for me, so I'll be back with a coffee, but that's going to be a really good one. So some key practical tips here for scaling personalization in Sitecore and making the most of what Sitecore offers. Firstly, predefined rules. If you don't know how to use them, work it out. And there is help to help you work it out, of course. Create them for your teams. Particularly if you are that central team, this can save a lot of time and avoid errors in putting together rules. One of the places where you end up getting very weird results from personalization is because people haven't really understood exactly what combination of all those rules to use. So creating the predefined rules where it says visitor is XYZ just makes it very, very simple for the marketers to put personalization in place. Bulk content profiling. If you haven't gotten in there, having a look at the search filters and search operations in the content editor is really, really cool. There are some very fun things you can do in there. For example, you can use it to apply profile cards or profile values to an entire results of a search. That can save you days of work in a few clicks. Just get the search right and you're good to go. Similarly, Path Analyzer. Okay, now don't be deterred by the spaghetti you get when you first go into Path Analyzer. Learn how to use it, and you'll be able to discover a lot of very, very useful information. Being able to create a funnel, group by template, reverse goal maps, etc. There is a lot in there. It is the black box of Sitecore. And if you're on 9.3, you can see a personalization report in the experience optimization model. But if you're in a version lower than that, you can look at creating a custom personalization report. So you can see all the personalized pages in one glance. You just need a little help from a friendly developer. So check out the guide for some details on that. And then marketing automation, right? Last but very, very much not least, learn what marketing automation can do for you here. It goes a long way beyond email. It includes actions such as increasing profile values based on a trigger, adding somebody to a list based upon the actions that they have taken. Again, privacy beware, we're talking about personalization here. Using email to nurture or transactions to entice visitors from one site to another. There is an awful lot that you can do in marketing automation. You can even use it to increase engagement values so that you can kind of bridge that gap between the segments, all right? To get details on how to use all of those things, I would encourage you to download the SBOSS Marketing Hacks guide. That is a really, really useful guide of how to do specific things. I would also encourage you to sign up for the Strategy MVP Advisory Council newsletter, which comes out every month and highlights the best content out there, from videos to articles the strategy community is putting out about how to do things. It's a really good ongoing education piece. And also join Sitecore Slack and Stack Exchange to tap into those really helpful community members when you need it. So if any of you have not engaged with the Sitecore community, they're a great bunch. I really recommend that you do that. So last but not least, technical, privacy, organizational, and governance considerations. There are some things that you need to think about here, okay? Firstly, understand how your cookies work. Don't leave that to a developer to tell you. You need to understand it, trust me on this, okay? There are changes that browsers are bringing in and sometimes rolling out again and then bringing back in again, thanks Google, which will affect your personalization plans, things like same site and stuff like that. And there's lots of good information out there about it written for marketers. This is especially crucial for the multi-brand sites, which are at that, multi-top level domains, okay? So you're gonna need to get creative to optimize across these sites, but don't let anybody tell you it can't be done, because it can. It will also impact multi-region sites. However, as I said, personalization across those is not usually as important as it is for a multi-brand. Multi-channel, if you're using subdomains such as shop.brand, business.brand, portal.brand, etc., really you're all good, but you just want to make sure that the configuration has been done right. The guide has a really helpful explanation of that. That you want to talk to your devs, again, collaborate across teams, to make sure that they've got it set up right so that you are going to be able to personalize from one site to another. And then if you're multi-segment only, then pretty much you're all good. Don't worry about it. But do keep in touch with what cookies are, what's happening in cookies and security, technical security, because, this is just not something where, you want to be caught on the back foot. These companies, the browser companies, can change things overnight with, they don't ask us first. So, you want to know what happens and what impact it has on you. I mentioned language versioning earlier when it comes to multi-region. If you're using language versioning to deliver your site in local languages, well done, that's good. Just make sure that the marketers are trained and given some documentation in order to make sure that they're doing the personalization in the correct layout, because otherwise, again, they could waste a lot of time, get some weird results, and get a bit frustrated and give up on it. And we don't want them giving up on it. Organizational structure and governance is not, to be honest, sounding like the sexiest topic out there, but it's a really important one, and once you get into it, it's a little bit cool. So the lack of good structures and governance has made many a promising optimization program flounder on the rocks. Have a think about that current organizational model. And again, this is where you want to get your executive sponsor involved, okay? Think through what's going to work for you. You might start out with either a completely independent or completely centralized model, for example, but over time, as you scale it, you're probably going to want to look at this hybrid matrix model. So you want to keep that in mind and move towards that, okay? And governance, as I said, document everything, all the things, write them down, and the why, not just the what, okay? Understand the reasoning for it. You want them to be following it voluntarily, because otherwise it's going to be somebody's extremely painful job to go up and fix it afterwards. There is a recent white paper from Sitecore around organisation and governance. It's actually been around for a long time, but it's been extensively updated. It's not just new pretty pictures. It's all been rewritten to cover organisation and governance, including things like commerce and content hub, you know, aligned to the new digital experience maturity model, and, you know, really good. So I do recommend that you have a look at that and make sure that, you know, the executive sponsor is kind of aware of that. Finally, a short word or two on a very, very big topic, privacy, okay? Now, again, much like with the cookies, make sure you know which laws are applicable and where, and don't rely on somebody else just to tell you you can and can't do that. Understand it, this is not that hard, right? Privacy laws and cultural attitudes towards digital privacy vary wildly around the world. And you need to be on top of this. It's not just the laws, but it's also the attitude towards it, right? Make sure everybody knows what they can and can't do, right? And err on the side of a privacy first mindset. And I really encourage you to pick plain language and, you know, don't kind of lapse into legalese and accept cookies. You know, you've got to have accept cookies in there, but be really clear and friendly about exactly why you're trying to do this personalization and why they need to accept the cookies. Because remember, the customers do want personalization. They just want to control what they're doing with what you're doing with their data. They want to understand it, okay? So be clear about it and they'll probably buy into it. And then Sitecore's capabilities, remember, do not require personally identifiable information for personalization. Things like self-selectors and content profiling or goals triggered, you know, doing personalization in session. You can get some great results out of that. So don't give up because the privacy laws are strict. There is a lot that you can do to get people further along the, you know, kind of the journey to trusting you and actually giving you their data. So nobody is going to pretend that organising an optimisation program for a multi-site instance isn't going to be extra work, because it is. However, the potential return on investment is exponentially higher than the additional effort involved. And as Rick rightly points out here, once you've got everything set up, all that work is repeatable and reusable. So, you know, actually you're being environmentally friendly by, you know, getting all this sorted. So that's an overview, obligatory meme thrown in, of what's in the multi-site personalization strategy guide. It's a lot. It's a big document, about 50 pages, but it's jam-packed full of good stuff, and I haven't even covered it all. So if you are very, very keen to get your hands on it, as I said, don't scream at me like Veruca, because nobody likes Veruca. You want to go to siteco.re/multisite, and you can download it. Now, before you go anywhere, I would like a virtual round of applause / fingers clapped, whatever, for these amazing community members. So these people put their hands up at the last MVP Summit to work on this collaborative white paper with us. And then they delivered lots of great ideas over their Christmas holidays at a time when in the world you'd actually could have gone outside, you know, so they weren't stuck inside with nothing else to do. They delivered lots of really great, you know, information, so I could help pull this white paper together, and I couldn't have done it without them. Speaking of which, next one. I am a sucker for punishment. We're doing another one. So off the back of this, the multi-channel is really interesting, and I think that that's something where we need to get a little bit more information for our customers. So we want to create a guide and resources for multi-channel optimization. You know, we want to look deeply into what are some things that you can do in marketing automation that are really easy. You know, how do you personalize if you're building a site with JSS? If you've got Content Hub and, more importantly, content marketing platform, that's the connection, what do you need to think about putting in place there? If you have integrations, how do you approach that? And then if you have integrations into non-Sitecore sites, and not just into customer data or platforms or DMPs, how do you approach that? So this is the next one. I'm a glutton for punishment. I seem to do this every year, and I am calling for people to help me on this. And I know there's a lot of really good experts out there. So you can reach out to me in the usual places. That would be Slack, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Not hard to find. There's not a lot of Alison Sainsbury's actually in the world. And are there any questions? Hey, Bruce.
Oh, thank you for that, Alison. I've been like, you just delivered a really beautiful blueprint for marketing success. If they just grab the book and read it through, it's going to work. So thank you very much for that.
No worries. How are we going for time?
Look, we've got about 5 minutes till the next session's due to start, so we just rip through some questions. Yeah, you're doing really well.
All right.
Okay, so is it possible to use the profile identified on one brand site and use it on another? If yes, then how?
Okay, so it's absolutely possible to use, do you mean use the profile for personalization or use the profile to apply to content and create patterns?
I'm not sure. We'll have to wait for Ranjit to get back us on that and clarify. And while we do, we'll just move on to another question. And this is a really interesting one because it's so gloriously non-technical. It's really, process and organisation.
Totally up my alley.
Yeah, it's totally up your alley. So what sort of techniques would you consider using for, de-siloing an organisation? Because we've always all come across that, right? Yeah, I can see your eyes roll back. Oh my goodness. Is
a sledgehammer an acceptable response? Okay, look, I did go through this to an extent, look, if you're not the CEO, eventually you're going to hit a bit of a wall, but, I find it's really good if you can try and work with the people who are doing the things and help them understand why it's really helpful if we all work together. If you educate yourself and you really understand how to use all of these marketing configurations and you approach it in a friendly manner of, hey, let's share how to do it, create your own little Sitecore user group within the organization, so that's how you're going to do it. Sharing those things across the organization, it's either going to happen at the executive level or it's going to happen at the level of, oh, we're just doing it, who's going to stop us, because they don't understand what we're doing anyhow. So I got quite a long way using that approach of just working with the people who are doing the things.
It is. It's a people thing, isn't it? Really, you have to get in there and get the thing happening. Yeah. Look, Ranjit responded. He said, "Yeah, is it possible to use a profile identified on one brand site and then on the other for personalisation as a contact ID is like this domain cookie?" And one of his customers had different domains and he couldn't do it. I'd expect that to be kind of out of the box, wouldn't you think?
Well, the domains thing is definitely an issue. So have a look in the white paper and have a Google for Jason Sincere's email article, about the same site cookie issue. They rolled out changes to same site cookie, then they rolled it back again. You definitely have to get creative if you're going across multiple top level domains, but there are ways to do it. So going to have to come up with some ideas in order to get the customer to voluntarily go from one to the other, because a lot of that will be blocked out of the box. So yeah, but it's worth doing. It's so worth doing that, coming up with that creative response to it is worth putting that effort in. And I'm happy to talk to you about some ideas offline.
Excellent. Now, here's an excellent question from Dennis Augustine. He wonders, how do you see customers working with both Content Hub and XP in these scenarios, given there's a bit of an overlap in terms of targeting and analysing across channels, brands, and segments between these two tools? So it is a big question.
Big question. I don't think I've got time to answer that in a minute, Dennis. Thanks. Look, I can tell you that SBOS is working on stuff about Content Hub, you know, so, and how to use it to personalize. So watch this space, I suppose, would be the way I would answer that at this stage.
Excellent, excellent. Stephen Brown asks, is there an alternative to multi-site setup? Which kind of, my eyes went a little crossed for a minute. I thought, well, yeah, just have one guy. But I'm not quite sure of the context of that question. If you might like to elaborate a bit there, Stephen. And we're coming up to almost to the end of the session. I'd really like to thank you, Alison. That's great.
Yep.
As you can see, we've got the COVID-19 Solidarity Response Fund page up. We're supporting the United Nations and WHO, the World Health Organization. It's a difficult time for frontline people and essential staff having to out there working. So they're doing it really tough. So we're supporting them with this event today. And you can go to that URL and donate. I think currently we've made around about 1,700 euros, which is probably about 2 million Australian dollars and about 3.5 million New Zealand pesos. It's actually about 3,000 New Zealand dollars. That's looking good, but we need people to just get out there and donate.
Okay, one more thing just before I go, I'm just going to put into the chat for everybody the multi-site poll. I'd love to see some results on that, and as I said, I will share them via our socials, and it's going to give us an idea as to how prevalent that is out there, because obviously we really don't know.
Yeah. Big thanks to Alex. I'm just going to make Chaturang as the presenter. He's ready to go. He's got the slide up.
Bruce, I already made him presenter. I already made him presenter, and he's sharing the screen.
We're getting good at this, mate.
Yep.
Okay, so it's 6:11. We're a minute late. So, Chat, if you just want to kick off, that'd be fab.
Thank you, Chaturanga.
Hi.
Can we hear him?
Yes.
Ah, great.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we can.